On my last Saturday stream, a question was posed in the chat. What is the best legendary tier destroyer? And at the time, I didn't necessarily have a solid answer to that question, but somebody else in that same stream asked me to play the legendary tier French destroyer Kleber. And at that time, I was thinking, well, maybe Kleber is a good candidate for best DD. And I'll present that case to you today. You can let me know what you think in the comments, but out of all the destroyers available at Legendary Tier at this time in 2026, I think Kleber has a good case for being called the best of them all, even with its history. When it was first added to Legends, it had much longer torpedo range and was even more powerful than it is today. It's been nerfed since then, but even still, there is no other destroyer I can think of at Legendary Tier that I would like to get into a gunfight with less than the Kleber. And that's what it all boils down to. Speaking of gunfights, I'll show you my commander build now. We're using Chuck, of course. A lot of people like Robin, Lay Fierce, as the commander, because of course he buffs the fire chance, but Chuck, I think, is a good one to have. Our inspirations on him are Rumble for more range and Sims for more HP. But I think the thing that makes Charles so good for the Kleber is his unique skill in the fourth row, which we have selected, called Strong Diplomacy. It does two things. Number one, it buffs the duration of the main battery reload booster, which makes it about 24.5 seconds instead of 20. That, of course, will allow us to get all this DPM here against the Shimakaze. And Shimakaze, even if he smokes up, he stands no chance against Kleber, especially when it has help from some teammates. We get the first blood medal and 15,000 of his hit points removed. There's another Shimakaze here as well that we can continue to shoot at even though the reload boost has expired. And as you can see, the main battery guns on the Kleber hit like trucks when you shoot them at enemy destroyers. That strong diplomacy skill buffs the duration of the main battery reload booster. It goes from 20 seconds to 24.5, which is nice. But I think even more importantly, probably, it buffs the turret traverse of the destroyer by 3.2 degrees per second. That means with this build, using the Epic Reload mod in the fourth slot, which of course cuts down or increases the turret traverse, even with that, we have a turret traverse time of 15.4 seconds. Without that strong diplomacy skill on Chuck, and with the reload mod, the turret traverse on Kleber is slightly over 21 seconds. I want to say 21.4. And when you have a destroyer built like this, we have a 5.8 second base reload, and then we've got 2 charges of a main battery reload booster that lasts for 24.5 seconds, which reduces the reload by 50%, making it 3 point something. When you have all that going for you and you're such an effective gunboat at demolishing enemy destroyers, you don't want slow turret traverse. You want to be able to get the guns on target, particularly if you encounter a destroyer at danger close range. If they can outmaneuver your turret traverse and you have to spend really any amount of time trying to get the guns to bear on target, well, then you're missing out on the DPM that you need to send the enemy destroyer back to port. And as I've said many times over the years, the most important things you can do in a destroyer are taking the objectives, spotting for your team, and countering the enemy destroyers. Now, sometimes, if you're a torpedo boat, you can counter the enemy destroyers by torpedoing them. But assuming that your opponents in the enemy destroyers have brains, then torpedoes aren't really the reliable weapon type to use to counter enemy destroyers. For that, you need good guns. And there's not too many destroyers at this tier that can compete with 2,000 maximum HE shell damage per shell on 8 guns that the Kleber has. Especially when that reload booster is active, it is absolutely lethal. The only thing that I think is somewhat close to it, I suppose, is maybe the Khabarovsk, whose HE does slightly less damage, but does have a similar reload to Kleber and no reload booster. I think its calling card is that it's got really flat shell arcs and it excels at hitting enemy destroyers from longer range, whereas they find it difficult to hit back at the Khabarovsk because of how fast and maneuverable it can be. You could really say the same thing about the Kleber. It's also got really fast shell velocity. It's really fast itself. We have a top speed of 45.3 knots on this build without the engine boost. So with it, we get somewhere around 50. And yeah, I'll put it this way. If I'm playing the Khabarovsk, the Kleber is the one destroyer I don't necessarily want to encounter because I know its main battery firepower can give me a run for my money. And also, back to Chuck, the commander, you might have noticed in the third row that I'm using the reaching out skill instead of twist and track. And you might tell me that twist and track buffs the turret traverse as well, and also gives you the benefit of having the radio positioning finder indicator that shows the direction of the nearest enemy ship, which is certainly valuable if you're a gunboat like Kleber trying to hunt down and counter the enemy destroyers. But to that, I would say the reaching out skill reduces the destroyer main battery reload time by a further 3% and increases main battery range. And I think I would almost rather take that to cut down on the DPM. Again, we have a 5.8 second reload base on these guns before we use the reload booster. And that is because of the reload mod and because of the reaching out skill, along with the observant range skill in the first row. And I think, well, build into the DPM as much as possible. Twist and track is nice. Being able to see the nearest location of the enemy destroyer is nice, but I don't think it's something you absolutely need when you're playing a gunboat. All you really need is good map awareness. And for our part, we've managed to take the Charlie Cap. We, of course, eliminated the Shimakaze over there, helped drive out the Louisiana by doing some open water gunboating. That guy's been sunk. And the rest of the enemy team's over here on this side of the map with the Incomparable, a couple other battleships, I think a cruiser, the Brisbane, and there is one last enemy destroyer left alive on the team that was last spotted in the vicinity of the Alpha Cap. Of course, we cannot push into the Alpha Cap with all these ships here, and we do get spotted by Incomparable, which is, not ideal. However, I think we'll be able to finish taking this cap, and we'll be able to sail out of detectability range. More torpedoes coming in at the Incomparable. Of course, Kleber torpedoes are pretty good too. Despite having only a 6-kilometer range these days, they do go at 75 knots, and they hit for a maximum of 16,000 damage. So, against something like the Incomparable, which has pretty terrible torpedo damage reduction to begin with, well, you don't want to be getting hit by them. But now that Incomparable is down, you can see the blue team is at a little bit of a disadvantage. We've got 2 battleships remaining, plus me, whereas the enemy team also has 2 battleships, a cruiser, and a destroyer, so it's a 4v3 in favor of the Reds. However, we've captured the majority of the capture circles. Reds are about to take Alpha, but it doesn't really matter when we're already 200-some points ahead, and we've got 3 out of 4 of the capture circles. As long as we don't all perish, and as long as the red team doesn't manage to take 2 of the caps that we hold, I don't see how they get ahead of us on points. So the win is in our favor. However, there's still some things we could do to throw the game, namely by just throwing away our ships. And initially I thought this USS Ohio, which started over here with us in the Bravo Cap, and as you can see is making a beeline for the Alpha Cap to go straight at that Yamato, I thought maybe it was his intention to throw the game, but I forgot. The Ohio is a fantastic battleship with excellent tankiness that can brawl. And so going for that Yamato maybe isn't that bad of an idea. The other battleship, of course, was just sitting there and he got taken out by torpedoes from the enemy destroyer, which of course allows us to know that the enemy destroyer is now somewhere in our spawn. So we're going to head in that direction. I think the key to winning this battle at this point will be to eliminate the enemy destroyer. If we can do that, then it means the enemy probably doesn't have a chance of taking any of the capture circles, and if we had to, we could simply run away and win on points. So once again, we've got the main battery reload booster up. We spot Som. He doesn't have a lot of HP to begin with. He tries to smoke up, but we still got a bead on his position, and it's easy enough to finish him off with a bit of a blind fire like we did the Shimakaze at the very beginning. And once again, the Kleber absolutely shreds the competition when it comes to enemy destroyers. You can tell me that something like the Shimakaze is a really good destroyer at legendary tier. I think that's a common opinion amongst the community, but to that I would say the only two good things about the Shima are number one, the concealment, which may allow you to outspot enemy destroyers, and that is useful, but only if your teammates are actually going to shoot at them, which of course is a questionable proposition these days. And then secondly, the torpedoes on the Shimakaze hit really hard, but I don't think they're all that dangerous. If you know where the Shima is on the map and you know where the torpedoes are coming from, I consider IJN torpedoes to be some of the easiest to dodge in the entire game because they have a huge sea detectability range of something like 1.7. You see them coming from very far away, and they also tend to spread out. So if you've got good map awareness and you've got the ability to use the rudder and engine, it's often very possible to dodge Shimakaze torps. And, you know, if you've ever played the Shimakaze and you've tried launching torpedoes against a maneuvering battleship that's playing well, then you've seen it can be very difficult to get torpedoes on target. They're just not as reliable as guns. The torpedoes, after all, have to traverse the water at speeds much slower than shells before they reach the target. And if they've got to traverse like 5 kilometers or something, well, it's easy enough for the target to move out of the way in the time it's going to take them to reach, whereas the guns, much more reliable, much more consistent, and on top of that, the tools that you need to counter the enemy destroyers and win games. Kleber has decent torpedo power, but what it's also got is excellent speed and excellent main battery firepower, and even today, in 2026, after the nerfs it received when it first debuted in the game, I still think it's one of the most powerful destroyers at legendary tier, if not the most powerful. Again, there are few other ships, few other destroyers at the legendary tier that I would like to get into a gunfight with less than the Kleber, particularly when it has its main battery reload booster, and even when it doesn't. Of course, we are running the Epic Reload mod, keep in mind, so we've done 130,000 damage. We've procced the mod 4 times. It can be procced up to 5 times, and each time it gives you a 2% buff to the reload speed. So at this point, this late in the battle, with it activated 4 times, we have a reload time of 5.2 seconds. That's down from the 5.8 base. I think if we were to proc it again, the reload time may go down to 5 seconds even. I don't think it would go down lower than that, but again, that's pretty good for having 8 139mm guns that deal damage of a maximum of 2,000 with the HE shells. And we haven't even mentioned the AP, which is excellent on the Kleber. It does a maximum of 2,700 damage, and being French, it's got pretty good penetration. It would be able to Citadel to Brisbane with no problem if he were presenting the proper angle and not going in and out of the smoke. And frankly, this is a little bit reckless, I suppose. We don't really need to be shooting at the Brisbane. We're just being greedy and farming a little bit more damage. But the Brisbane has really floaty shells. And even at a range of 9 kilometers, if we abuse the throttle and the rudder, it's going to make it difficult for him to consistently land salvos on us. So we're basically safe to be a little bit reckless and do that. There's our teammate, the USS Ohio, who I initially thought was making not a great decision, but it turned out he did actually make a great decision. And his aggressiveness against the Yamato and the remaining ships on the enemy team was, I suppose, key to winning this battle, along with what we were able to accomplish. We're number 1 and 2 on the leaderboard, respectively. So GG to that Ohio. You did some good work there at the end, I would say, and we managed to win the game at the top of the leaderboard with 3,400 base XP in the Kleber, and there were no planes to shoot down this match. You can see the Shimakazes on the bottom of the leaderboard, which is where I often see Shimakazes. So those of you out there who claim that the Shimakaze is S tier at legendary tier, I'd say no. If I were going to rate destroyers By tiering them in the legendary tier, Kleber would be an automatic S. Shimakaze, at best, would be a strong B. That's my thoughts on it. Kleber, excellent ship. Let me know what you think in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.